just a real brief overview. So our Housing and Community Development Department, the whole purpose of our department is to support uh, pretty much tenant advocacy, homeless prevention, affordable housing preservation and creation, and overall community development. And so within our department, we're responsible for the planning, the implementation, the monitoring, and the financial management of what we have presented before you today, which is the Community Development Block Grant. This is where I kind of dive a little bit more deeper up front, but we'll kind of talk about some of these things throughout today's presentation, which we'll probably go through a little bit more quicker. Like I said, we have some seasoned individuals here, but this information will also be readily online for individuals who are not able to come here today. So what I don't have up here, as we are here at the top left-hand corner, the CDBG program overview. But even before you get to this point, we highly encourage, especially when we're dealing with facilities for this particular round, is to start at the very beginning. You are here at what I like to call stage 3 of the development process. Okay, you will have your start off in the beginning with your overarching idea of what you want to do. You would kind of go through the groundwork of going through planning department to see if it's feasible, do some checks and balances along the way, prior to you getting to what I would like to call collecting resources and funding, right? And so typically, and we will be making this a standardized process across the board. Did not do it this year for federal, but it will be coming within the next year of doing so. But what we do is we highly encourage individuals to start off with our development assistance team. And so I include this information because what a lot of people don't understand and realize that one of our core problems of why development does not occur at the rate that is expected is because they're missing steps along the way that causes things to pause. And sometimes they are long pauses. And these are things that we cannot, I guess you can say, fast track through. There's checks and balances along the way for a lot of different reasons, but more importantly, protecting the taxpayer dollar and which support these programs. And so I tell people all the time, before you even submit an application, you probably want to go through the development assistance team just to make sure your project is buttoned up and tight with all these different aspects that the development assistance team is going to offer you. They also include the different departments who will review your project, who are in line with the development of your project, public works, water department, and so forth and so on. And what they do is they take the time out to meet with you. You tell them whatever your project idea is, whether you have it at the very beginning stages of just a thought process, or you have it clearly defined. And then they will be able to review your project and either tell you if it's ready to go, or if it's not ready to go, what you can do to get your project ready to go, if it is indeed a feasible project that they can see forthcoming. Typically, in other platforms, as far as funding opportunities, Housing Trust Fund, CCD, we ask to get a letter from the development assistance team showing that you have met with them and that your project is feasible and ready to go. We did not do it, like I said, for this particular RFP round. We still will take this in consideration to possibly have somebody from the planning department to review applications with us, just so they can give us some feedback. But I wanted to share this with the community as a part of our process that we like for people to take heed to. With that being said, going over just some other information real quick that's pertaining to the I want to say about 8 boxes that we just came from the PowerPoint presentation. Another very important part of you getting through this process for the reprogramming funds is going to be compliance through our CREO KC. And so there are mandated goals across the board. Since this is a federal project, it is subject to Davis-Bacon and prevailing wage, whichever one is the higher of the two in regards to how much it costs for labor within those particular construction scopes. But you also will have M and WBE goals, which is subject to 15 and 15 for construction services, 14 and 14 for professional services. Anything below the thresholds of the 160 for professional or 300,000 for construction will be subject to SLBE, which is small local business enterprise goals. You have a workforce goals, which is not to be confused with MWBE goals. MWBE goals are for a particular firm and the services that they provide. Workforce goals is actually boots on the ground. Who are the individuals, whether they're minority or women? And that is a 10% for minority, 2% for women. And then you have, again, Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage, whichever is the higher of the two in terms of paying for the specific scopes at the rate by way of the Missouri wage order. Okay. Now, I tell people all the time, don't be scared. There's plenty of opportunity out there. And in terms of even having participation for MWBE, you got to get it directly from the MWBE directory, which will take you to this link, and very easy to navigate through if you want to be more specific too. And then you can keep also HUD Section 3, because Section 3 may apply because it is a federal program as a requirement to your project. And then if you want to look at it by way of specific business name, now I will say that this is a source to where you have to be specific to, or you can be general. And I want to say specific to, like a business name. You can't misspell anything. It has to be that business name as they provided it to the city. And we typically go off that W-9 is where we take the business name off of. Or you can do a description of the type of services that you're rendering, and it'll pull up a whole list. My point is, when it comes to you going through and meeting the requirements from our M&WBE perspective, they're going to look at either meeting the goal or submitting what's called a good faith effort. And if you do not submit a good faith effort based upon you scrubbing this list, and I'll give you just a real quick prime example: painting. Oh, no, you know what? Drywall. So for M&WBE, you have over 30 firms that are certified in our system. So what that means is when you are evaluating scopes and you sit here and you say, well, I can't get an M or WBE firm, or do you have no firms? They do a quick search just like this. And this is real time. So as soon as they put somebody in the system, or as soon as their expiration date hits, it fluctuates real time. So if you were to turn in the CUP to say, hey, I can't meet a goal of 14 or 15 to 15, they see a scope out there, you have to do what's called a good faith effort to show why it is that you were unable to find a scope of painting in terms of you not being able to contract with one based upon you scrubbing the data that's provided. I tell people all the time, very short and sweet situation system that I tell people, download the entire directory, create a Google form that lists all your scopes. And I actually have a process, and I'll share with you all online as well. And then pretty much have them checked off the box if they are a certified, business and whatever those scopes are. Send it out. Give them 2 weeks to respond. There's your list. Okay, we have over about 3,000 vendors in the system for various scopes and things of that nature. Don't overthink it. Kind of go out and fish that way. So that way, in the event that you do scrub that list that comes back and you still aren't able to reach those goals of 15 to 15 to 14 to 14, well, you got your good faith effort because you actually strategized, contacted everybody, you got it in writing via email, and it showcases that you have reached out to these individuals and then they didn't respond. Okay. So just kind of giving some game there of ways to easily navigate certain things. Our website is very functional, user friendly, and it has a wealth of information here. Not for sure how y'all found out about today's event. However, I highly encourage people to go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. We typically like to send out information to people via newsletter. So this is the easiest way to stay in contact with us. I also go a little bit above and beyond. I got some emails from some people that I keep a list of, or I try to grow my list of, that I send this information out. I'll post this stuff on my social media accounts as well. But I just want to make sure everybody is abreast on how to stay up with the latest information that we have. Some other things I did want to cover real quick before I go into the rest of the PowerPoint presentation. Obviously, application information is underneath our federal link here. So if you got here and you went to underneath the federal, you'll find the information that we are going to be covering today, which is the reprogramming information right here, the 2024 application. So it includes the application, the eligible activities, and all of the forms that go along with completing, so you can upload that information to the application, which is here. Very easy application to navigate through. I got some good information up front that you need to read, but all lines and all parts of this application need to be filled out. Even if it's something that does not apply, you need to, upload a document that says it's not applicable and explaining your reason why. So that way we can make sure that you are answering all questions. Here's the difference between previous rounds of reprogramming or even annual action plan RFPs is you're now able to select not only the national objective, but what specific matrix code specifically that is going to be tied to your project. So that way there's some alignment. We can ensure that everybody's on the same page and you are meeting the national objective in addition to a specific matrix code that must be defined that goes along with the approval of your application if you are selected. Here's the list of the matrix codes in detail. So if anybody's confused, but I don't know what 03A senior centers is, it gives you a descriptive of what that looks like. So that way you're able to make the most sound decision in your application process. Worst case scenario, I have a point of contact that can be reached out to, which we'll get to through the rest of this presentation, and then they will be better or able to assist. Okay, so before I move back to the presentation, do I have any questions thus far? Hearing none. We'll get this thing moved around. Go back to the presentation. Okay. So kind of going back to the alignment, talked about what you should be doing prior to. Now we're talking about what we're doing here as far as the overview. There are pre-contracting procurement process in which some of those questions and documentation that you're going to be providing in your application is satisfying that requirement. What we're trying to do is streamline the contracting process. And so anything that is not cost effective as much as we can avoid, we try to get that documentation up front. Understand, that's one of the other kickers that, and I again probably don't need to tell you all, but development does include risk. So there are things that you're going to have to pay for out of pocket, and you're not possibly going to be guaranteed anything. But we try to minimize what those things look like. So case in point, we're not going to ask for a certificate of insurance because you have not been awarded any funds from the city, right? And that not only is that cost effective, but that also ties you in with the city. But things like an environmental review, I tell people all the time, if you're looking to get federal funds, you're gonna have to go through the process regardless. And plus, we cannot sign a contract, and no one can sign a contract from a federal standpoint until an environmental review is done. And if there are requirements that need to be cured prior to the contract, that those things are completed. Those are some of your risk things that you might have to take in consideration. Obviously, we talked about a little bit of the CREO requirements. Again, those compliance requirements, those are non-negotiables. Those are in our statutory language through our ordinances. And it's a part of your contract as well. Contract and execution period of performance. We do have a couple of things put in place now. You got a wealth of information in your packets as well. It speaks to more of the city requirement of development, which from the date of ordinance, you have 3 years to complete your economic development project, and you have up to 5 years to do an affordable housing project up to 20% of as long as it reaches the threshold of at least 20% affordability within the project. But we have more restrictive requirements within our department in policy, which you have 12 months to contract with the city. Understand that these contracts are done in 2-year terms, or excuse me, for CDBG it's a 1 year. But understand that you may be eligible or able to request for a extension. We recommend reaching out to the department no later than 60, between 60 and 90 days to request that extension, because if you wait till the last day and your contract expires, you won't get an extension, that money goes back to our pocket. The reason why we're a little bit more stricter, especially for federal programs and funding, is because we actually are required to spend this money within a certain amount of time. And we are also, as far as the city's concerned, we have compliance obligations as well. And so if we don't expend these funds within a certain amount of time, then the federal, those federal dollars can be taken back from us. Because they're like, hey, you're sitting on money, you're not spending it. So what we try to do is clean up our process so we can flow and ensure that our money gets spent, and we are ensuring that the money is spent properly in the right way. I will tell you this, through other federal programs, we have had to take recently back up to $500,000 from projects. Not because they never spent the money, but they properly spent the money. Okay, so we want to just make sure that we have checks and balances across the board. And the kicker is this: even if you all spent the money, the city still owes the money. So we got to collect the money back from somebody, right? And that may prevent future funding opportunities, because until we get our money back, we're probably not gonna fund any more projects moving forward. We have a payment plan, all that type of stuff. So I try to give people, uh, holistically what this process looks like, so they understand rhyme and reason why we have all of these different requirements. But the kicker to this is openly available. And one of our things that I've been working on specifically, and as our department, our city's been working on specifically, is providing a deeper level of customer service to help people get through this process, right? It's not that we understand that it is a process. It's not rocket science, so it's not a hard situation, but it is a situation that if you're not familiar with it, until you become familiar with it, you might need some hand holding along the way. Again, which is why we are ensuring that this information is readily available online 24/7, so you can read it, share it, and get used to the process and procedures requirements to make your project and make our city successful overall. All right, so CDBG overview, just getting down to it. I'm not going to read everything, but again, because this information will be out there, but pretty much the CDBG is a funding tool that helps provide annual grants through states and cities and counties for the development of the urban communities. The program is authorized by the Housing Community Development Act of 1974. It consolidates several community development grants. We have like ESG, that's part of the HUD funding. We have HOPWA, which is housing for people with age. We have community development block grant. We have ESG, which is emergency solution grants. We have HOME, which is not a grant, it's a loan, but it is for the development of housing in these communities as well. And obviously they have these thresholds of, you have to qualify within the local, low and moderate income area. And you also, so not only does the area has to qualify, but the individual that will be receiving the benefits from the services and or the outcomes has to qualify as well. And that is at the 80% or below AMI level. Now, I know people ask the questions all the time because they capital stack with other opportunities. I'm sure y'all probably are feeling familiar with the Housing Trust Fund. So if you are getting funding to, let's just say for CDBG, hey, I wanna utilize this money to site prep, right? And then I want to utilize because you pretty much look at it horizontal, anything horizontal, or if it qualifies professional services up to a certain percentage, you can utilize funding for CDBG, but it really doesn't fund any opportunities for any vertical build, right? So now you go to Housing Trust Fund for vertical build, but Housing Trust Fund has a stipulation of 60% or below AMI. So what you can't do is say, oh, I got federal funds, I'm gonna do 80% and below, whichever is more restrictive is how that works. So I tell people all the time, and just understand what these requirements are and understand it's always gonna be whatever is most restrictive. Not as, oh, well, it's federal trumps state, and this, no, whatever is most restrictive. Okay? It's always gonna be the situation. We can't be less restrictive, but we can be more restrictive. National objectives. So pretty much is line up with 3 different national objectives to benefit the low moderate income person of preventing or the prevention and elimination of slum and blight, and then meeting the urgent need, right? And so that's the first step. And so if your project doesn't do one of these 3, you automatically don't qualify. But even from there, once you do it, you have to then meet one of those objectives through the matrix code. And that way there's some alignment, because they have reporting requirements that we must give to them in order to not only sustain what we have as far as funding and project activity, but also to close out the project. They want to see and ensure that the funding is being utilized for the purposes in which it was intended for per your application. So I always tell people, a couple things you want to start out when you are applying for city funding. Number one, I tell people all the time, go look at the city's business plan, right? Make sure your project is in line with the city business plan, but furthermore, make sure that it is aligned with the requirements from HUD. Okay? That way you have a win-win situation when you're applying for certain things and you're able to speak to it through your application and connect those dots that make you have a strong application. Non-public service, public facility, public improvements. So pretty much it's the definition of, what we are, willing to fund with this money for this particular RFP, improvements, activities such as housing, rehabilitation, code enforcement, acquisition of real property, demolition infrastructure, public facility improvements, and economic development overall. Again, as long as it's within that matrix, but this is just kind of a high level overview of what that looks like.
How do you define public facility?
Anything that is not, to be honest, anything, it should be open and public facing, to where it's accessible to the public. So if it's closed off, if it's private, if it's membership only, if it's all that, those type of things, it doesn't qualify. But, I almost look at it like you being able to walk into a grocery store versus you being able to walk into a community center versus being able to walk in, pathways, this is a non-for-profit, public facing facility, so it's not.
Is Blue Room public facility?
Good question. See, those are the questions that I say, you know what? I'll take that question. I'm gonna go ahead and email my HUD rep to make sure I don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
But in most cases, when you look at it from the perspective of dealing with economic development, I would say, it would be considered somewhat of a criteria for public facility. I will say that some of these funds that we've utilized in the past, and I know we got some things coming, forthcoming. So everybody kind of knows that 18 Divine is going to be shut down for a little while. They're going to redo and make it a green and walking space. We may be able to fund some entities that may be supporting the small local businesses. Because this is a public facing area, for businesses, for public consumption. So with that being said, yeah, by definition, it falls in line.
Dion, so in the action plan, so section 3, it has more than just public facilities and improvements listed under the eligible activities for regular CDBG. And then in CV, it just has the public facilities on the eligible activities. Are you considering projects outside of public facilities and improvements in non-public services and in these other categories? Specifically, the rehabilitation is listed for single and multifamily, so minor home repair. Is that being considered?
Right, preparedness.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So it's everything that is listed
Yes.
in this section is eligible.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, all right. Additional public facilities, information, acquisition, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, or the instant.
Were you referencing CDBG COVID or CDBG in general?
CDBG in general.
The reprogrammed CDBG,
Gotcha.
section 3 has more eligible activities listed under non-public service than CDBG CV, which specifically is only public facilities eligible.
Correct, it's more restricted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we also, based on that restriction, Deputy Lewis and team decided to look for specific eligibility requirements under under CDBG code. So it is, and that use of funds is more limited anyway for this RFP or reprogramming round. But yes, you're right. I was working on something, so I didn't.
That's okay.
And then also there was a question about public facilities, right?
Yeah.
What is?
What is considered
defined?
public? Yeah.
Yeah, as, I think in general, HUD defines public facility as a structure that's either, owned by the public or is, predominantly used by the public with low cost is the other thing. So something that is a structure that's free, open to everyone. Not restricted by age or obviously any other discriminatory factors or something we might see is that. So the blue room could be, do they have a cover charge?
They do at times.
They do at times. So that could be something that the blue room or jazz district is another one because they have an open component that is for the general public. So they can tap into those dollars, but the blue room may be more restricted. So it's just looking at some of those guidelines.
And then, like we said, because there are a whole lot of nuances per project, so I always say, just tell us. If we don't know off the top because of the nuances, we definitely will reach out to the HUD reps and then they'll definitely give us a definite answer, whatever that looks like moving forward. Again, public facilities may only be owned by these type of entities, and then if the assisted facility is owned by a non-for-profit, the CDBG regulations stipulates that the facility must be open to the public during normal working hours. Again, this is owned by a non-for-profit. It is open during working hours, so it would qualify.
So here I go again.
Yes, sir.
Not for profit. Got that one.
Mm-hmm.
What about, what I would call, CIDs? In other words, what if you had a community improvement district
Mm-hmm.
that is considered a, a political subdivision?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no?
I would say yes.
Okay.
My first take on it would say yes. Again, community improvement district, it's in the name, community improvement district, so it's open to the community. So by virtue of the name itself, I say it qualifies.
Okay.
Eligibility types of facilities and improvements, infrastructure improvements, like we said, construction and installment, but not limited to streets, curbs, or including, but not limited to streets, curbs, water and sewer lines. Like I said, you gotta look at the horizontal versus vertical. So those are the type of things, construction wise, that it's gonna support. I know Becky talked about minor home repair, so those are things that are specialties that it supports. So HVAC, roofing, some of those small important factors that affects living conditions. But we're not gonna build a house, so. Neighborhood facilities, including not limited public schools, libraries, recreational facilities, parks, playgrounds, and other facilities for persons with special needs, such as facilities for the homeless, domestic violence shelters, nursing homes, or group homes for the disabled. All examples of eligible facilities. Eligible costs, energy efficient improvements. Again, these are all examples. Handicap accessibility improvements, including improvements to buildings used for the general conduct of government, and in the architectural design features and other treatments aimed at improving aesthetic qualities such as sculpture and tile. Again, all examples of eligible costs. Ineligible activities. include but not limited to the maintenance and repair of public facilities improvements, in which are generally ineligible. A public facility otherwise eligible for assistance underneath the CDBG program may be assisted with CDBG funds, even as part of a multiple use building containing ineligible uses, if they have one of these two criteria. The public portion of the facility is otherwise eligible and proposed for assistance will occupy the designated and discrete area within the larger facility, so it can't be closed off. The grantee can determine the cost that attributes to the facility proposed for assistance as a separate and distinct from the overall cost of the multiple use building and or facility. So again, it can't be restricted. It has to be all inclusive.
So I know the thing we're looking at is we're wanting to add non-congregant beds to a plan that would not be eligible under the, I'm sorry, I think I misstated that. We're wanting to add congregant beds to a plan we have that has non-congregant beds.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about the not closed off part of that, are you saying, are we talking two different things of what we mean by closed off, or? Because I mean, we would have separated secured areas for different communities that might be involved, such as maybe seniors, such as maybe a division of men and or women in a congregant setting of shelter.
Yeah, so there's shelter guidelines, obviously, that are there
Yeah.
for obvious reasons.
It's just saying like where you can't, that the public would not have access to, like, i.e. someone that's experiencing homelessness, like. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand that part of the ineligible.
Yeah, and like I said, to be fair, my suggestion is, without just giving you an answer, submit that in writing to us.
Yeah.
And then we'll follow that up with our CDBG rep.
Yeah,
And that way we make sure we give you.
Because I think it's saying something different, but it also sounds like as I add that to what.
I mean, look at it this way, domestic shelters.
Correct.
Obviously.
Correct.
There's stipulations that make it closed off, but we're just talking about in general.
Yeah.
So what this is, my understanding from our head rep is, what this is inferring is not a homeless shelter, but this would be like a community center.
Got
where
it.
Part of it.
And that's what I was
is
taking it as.
Not public.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fair.
You have to attribute the cost.
And that's what I was taking it as, but at the same time, then you're like, okay, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, we'll ask that.
A perfect example is Jazz District. If you've been to the museum, they have the open portion that's public that you don't pay for. So in order for them to acquire those type of dollars, they kept that portion separate.
Yeah,
Meaning that you can walk in the atrium,
Yeah.
gather how you want to, Doug,
yeah.
but the portion
That makes sense.
is completely on a different side.
And wouldn't be eligible for things like
Not
this.
eligible and is separated.
No, that makes sense.
Another entity.
Perfect. Thank you.
CDBG COVID public facilities. Again, there has to be a tie. And there's specific requirements in regards to that in dealing with COVID. I know, as far as the unsheltered or the unhoused side of the house, it's pretty much wide open for it. Just because obviously the results of COVID can lead to unhoused situations for individuals. So, but for all other activity and eligibility, I would just say, adhere to what that looks like and tying it back to COVID. Because if it's not tied to COVID, they're not going to accept the project as delivered. So within those COVID public facilities, including public access facilities owned by public entities and not-for-profit organizations that encompass temporary or specialized shelter emergency shelters, nursing home, residential medical facilities, other types of short-term transitional shelter. Is primarily intended to address the physical improvement costs of public facilities rather than provide support for operating costs or services within the facilities, and the grantees can fund the operations of some public facilities as public services using CDBG or CBG, COVID or CBG funds. So this is where we kind of fast track because I kind of talked about some of these things, but I just kind of want, like I said, prepare you up front for these conversations. Our point of contact, and I'm gonna tell you this too. So again, part of streamlining, we do have one person who is assigned as our procurement contractor. Understand, she sees all the contracts, she puts together all the contracts for our department. Our department oversees contracts for CCD, Housing Trust Fund, all the federal programs that were mentioned through our annual allocation, the tenant advocacy contracts, the unhoused contracts. So on any given month, she could be seeing anywhere from 30 to 60 contracts and having those interactions with people. I'm in the space and place of allowing grace, but we do have timelines that we try to meet and adhere to and try to make that process easier for our contract point of contact. With that being said, email is the best way, and it doesn't matter what point of contact I'm speaking of, I'm referencing. Email. Documentation. I don't mind people calling. Even when you call, follow up with an email for our conversation. So that way you're attracting this information. I also highly encourage, and it's for several different reasons. Please stay in contact with the point of contacts for either whether we're talking about contracting, whether we're talking about CDBG program, whatever the case may be. What happens is, and something that we're enforcing, so you all will know about, but we also are enforcing a chain of command policy moving forward, right? So what I'm trying to ensure is that as you all should be getting services at the level that you need, I'm trying to ensure and engage in empowering people to be able to do their jobs, right? I've seen it, and I've been with the city 6 years. Like I said, I got a military background, so I'm not really used to it, but people would jump from the airman straight to the general. And I'm like, dude, that ain't how that works. The general doesn't know what you're talking about. And then there's so many people in between that should have been contacted prior to getting to the general, right? So my whole point is, if this person is not answering you or, whatever the case may be, then we just pony up to the next person. But also allow people an understanding that, like I said, that's why I kind of just preface it with this one person may be working on 30 to 60 contracts. But we are typically in the space and place of providing customer services. So I generally am looking for staff to respond within 48 hours. And if they don't respond, follow up. And then if they don't respond, then definitely was tiered up. But Janine is the point of contact for this procurement contract process. And so prior to entering into any agreement, you are required to submit those administrative documents in preparation for contracting, right? These are non-negotiables. These are things that through policy and procedure, we have to have these things in order to contract. Okay? If you don't have them, we can't contract. That goes back to the whole 12-month policy because people wouldn't provide the insurance or people wouldn't provide what do you want to call it? I'm trying to think of what's something else. E-Verify. They wouldn't provide good standing good standing from the state of Missouri. Well, you don't provide it, we can't contract.
Ask for an application.
There you go. So that's what we try to do. We try to do it up front. So, there wasn't these things on the back end. Please ensure that the contact information, name, title, addresses, and there's needs to execute the contract is also included. Also, make sure that the entity that's applying for the funding is the entity that you're providing documentation for. So if you say, oh, well, me and such a partner, but I'm just using my entity. No, you probably need to create an LLC that includes you, both of you all. You know what I'm saying? That way, because if the expectation is that both of you all are supposed to be in this particular application, and you're partnering, then you probably need to create a partnership opportunity in which you can apply underneath that partnership. If not, then whoever the entity that is applying for is the entity that will be getting the funds and having the expectation to move forward with all those other aspects of things. We're not changing that, oh, well, we decided to partner this, that, and the other. That ain't how that works. Once it's ordinance, and that's what we go off of the application, then that's how we stick with it. Okay. Administrative documents should contain the legal name, again. Yes, please. Go ahead.
So, this is not just personally, but professionally, if you establish an MOU with whomever that partnering organization is, obviously that MOU can be substantiated by the contract when you're entering your period of performance for whatever the agreement is that we're funding. And that way we know there's a strengthened relationship and whatever that outlines as far as your memorandum of understanding with that partner, instead of us negotiating mid-contract with this other third party. And that way you work all those things out before we get to that point. So I think that might help. And we'll utilize that MOU as a part of the documentation along with your scope and then your budget, so that we can see how you both leverage during the course of that contract.
So to your point, you say MOU, you prefer just MOU, or do you prefer MOU and operating agreement, or does it not matter?
It could be and/or.
And/or.
The way the city contracts are written too, we've seen that multiple times where it more than likely it's an operating agreement. It's what supports you best and what your goals are, or that outcome of that scope. And MOU might not work best for that. But if you're Becky and there's certain public services, an MOU might support her better. But if you're building, obviously, certain infrastructure, or then you may need the operating agreement. There might be, what did we talk about yesterday? Deeds or acquisitions. So there's gonna be some other parameters that they need to be more outlined over a course of a document, and the MOU is not strong enough. Yeah.
Again, procurement documents, certificate of insurance, Missouri Secretary of State, certification of good standing, E-Verify in the MOU that comes along with the E-Verify, tax clearance letter, tax clearance form. And in your packet, you do have, I want to say a tax clearance form that you must fill out and submit to the city to in turn retrieve the tax clearance letter. People will submit this. This is not what I need. I need the letter that comes back on behalf of you submitting this information. Please send complete form too. You don't send it to me. You're going to send it to the business license, the city hall, first floor. And then they will in turn process it within a couple of days and send something to you probably within a week's time. These are things that we need to get on sooner than later. And I failed to make mention of this, which I should have made mention of up front. But in addition to going to DAC first, if you're not registered, if your business is not registered with the city of Kansas City, then they're not going to acknowledge you as a vendor. So you have to, do your checks and balances. So these are all preliminary things that need to take place prior to doing an application with the city. Okay. UEI is required. Matter of fact, they now are putting that number in your contract. That is a new requirement of, federal requirement that just came down this year. The W-9 form. The reason why I took them all out, and I ain't had time to print the new ones, because they're not taking anything that is older than 2024. So the 2018 W-9 form is no longer valid. They're no longer taking it. Do not submit a 2018 W-9 form. You need to submit a 2024 W-9 form. And it must be dated, which we're still in 2024, so you'll be good within the last 12 months. Okay. So if it's an older one, because you say, oh, I had a project 2 years ago, I'm just using the same W-9, it was dated in 2022. No, that needs to be within the last 12 months. Other documents submitted for execution of contract, again, line item budget. That item budget needs to ensure that you are directly tagging the scopes that are eligible to the dollar amounts in total that you're getting from the city. That's how we're gonna do reimbursements. And it is a reimbursement. There is no money put up front. So you do have to render services in order to get money back and show proof that these services were paid for. Scope of work in services to support those things. Again, just kind of talked about it, biz care, guide to working with the city. Very, very important step. Environmental review. Now, yesterday, somebody was speaking highly to it. Email it today. As soon as you get the leave, start that process, because we cannot contract if we do not have an environmental review completed. It is a requirement of HUD that it has to be reviewed and approved prior to contracting and awarding any money. If we do that, we could be creating what's called a choice limited action, which then you will not qualify for any funding, period, at least for a substantial amount of time. Claire Chafin, she is our new, who left us? I can't remember his name. Tom. Yeah. She is the new Tom Deck. Reach out to her. She's very responsive. But again, she's doing this for the whole city. So give her grace, give her space. She don't reply back within 48 hours. Send another email. Again, email. Want to follow with a phone call as well, that's fine, but make sure you document email. And then if you're unable to get in contact with her, let someone within the housing, your point of contact, your program manager or their manager know, so they can get you a response sooner or later. But the sooner you get through this, the better you're in position to contract. If Claire does not, and here's the deal, it goes through Claire gets the approval through HUD. If Claire never gives you an approval letter back that says you're good to go, you can't do nothing. Understand too, you can't start on any type of work until environmental review is done. Okay? Environmental review officer will determine the level of review necessary. They also, certain levels of review requires the owner and developer to hire an environmental consultant to complete the review. Again, that's money that you might have to spend up front out of pocket. It may be reimbursable. So that's a discussion to have with the program manager, but there will be money that'll come out of pocket. And maybe one of the only reimbursable costs up front, if at all. Understand too, the contracts with the city, unless there's something that allows you through the federal government situation, and it's not in line to something that we have that's more restrictive. We only pay for work performed after contracting with the city. So there is no, oh, well, we did this 6 months ago. I know we just contract, but I got a receipt for the, I don't matter.
Except for possibly this.
Except for possibly this. Okay. This is why I also we encourage you to hurry up the contract. So that way, you know, you can take the time doing whatever you want to do, you know, and I'm gonna get to this here in a second with Creo, but, yeah, just hold tight on that one. City verifies review findings, and submits to HUD. That's clear. HUD issues authority to use grant funding. If HUD doesn't issue that authority, you have no contract, you have no money. This process may take you 3 months. This is why I say start now. Because if this holds up your contracting, here's my deal. When that 12-month period ends and you ain't contracted with the city, I'm taking the money back. We not say, oh, well, you know what, we waited 6 months to start this process, come to find out it's gonna take us this amount of time to do such and such. Well, that's something that, again, we need to be working on the front end. You don't want to work on the back end because, again, if you are expecting to go through with this project, you need to be ready to strike while the iron is hot. Get your contract submitted, executed, and then start on whatever you need to be doing. Here's another thing somebody pointed out yesterday. Oh, what about Brownsfield money? You waiting on Brownsfield money, you should not be in this workshop. That is about a 12 to 15-month process. Okay? You are way ahead of the game. Get your Brownsfield done, then come to us. Okay? Unless you're not counting on Brownsfield. But again, Brownsfield comes first. It's gonna take about 3-month application process. By the time you get awarded, it's another 9 months to follow through on that award. Could take up to 12 months to follow through, depending on what type of remediation that's needed, you know. And so we're not gonna hold on to funds while you're trying to work out Brownsfield. There's another round that will come. Environmental review continue. Irrigation, regardless of what part of the project that the grant money will be used for, the entire project must be considered for the environmental review. Case in point, Ray Park. They want to say, hey, I'm just doing just this section for right now. Ray Park is almost 40 acres. I got to do the environmental review for the whole 40 acres, not just for this section. Obviously, the larger the project, the longer it's going to take. So, they don't section it off. Well, this is just phase 1. Okay, cool. We're going to do the whole thing now. So, I don't care that it's phase 1, y'all going to come back. Any related activities that are connected geographically, functionally, or logically has to be included. Environmental review officer must be notified of any alterations to the plan project during the environmental review process. You didn't turn in the plan, and all of a sudden you made some alterations, something all, you know, they won't find out. If they do find out, that's gonna cost you. Going back to what I said earlier about the choice limited action. Action taken after the grant application date and before the environmental clearance is issued that will potentially limit project alternatives. It's choice limited action. Examples, construction demolition. Like I said, oh man, we just gonna do a little grading over here real quick, just kind of get a little head start. Pull your money. You must already got something lined up. Because you ain't about to use the federal funds no more. You just committed a choice limited action. Oh man, you know, we had a option to purchase. I went on ahead and just closed the deal, man. Okay. You, sir, you, ma'am, no longer has federal funds. You just committed a choice limited action. Okay. Spending any public or private money on the project. Well, this ain't federal funds, this is private money. This ain't, why y'all worried about my money? Once you got $1 federal funds in it, it's a federal project. Once you got $1 city funds in it, it is a city project. If you want it to remain your project, then do not ask for federal or city funds. You can do whatever you want to do. But they have stipulations. We have stipulations. Okay, execution of legal binding agreements. Oh, well, I decided to get a partner. No, you didn't, you changed something up. You didn't committed a choice limit action. Get that stuff done prior to your application. Okay. Choice limit actions disqualifies projects. If there's any doubt, check with Claire. She is your environmental review officer. These are things, and I say this for a reason, these are things that leadership cannot alter. That's why I said just go through the process. Because what leadership is ultimately going to do is going to come back and check with us. Hey, we had this thing. They said that, it was having some difficulty. Sir, ma'am, this is the requirement. This is what HUD said. Oh, okay, never mind. I'll let them know to check with you. Okay. This is why we have to follow the chain of command, because there are things that are very, very specific to that we must adhere to. Going real quick, Creo. We talked about this. Enforces the workforce goals for projects must be established before the notice. So here's the deal. So at one point in time, some of y'all may or may not remember, they were asking, or I don't want to say asking, they were requiring the execution of a CUP and an LOI prior to contract. But we got that changed. But what did not change is that you would not receive funds until you have executed CUP and LOI. Also, if your project requires other activities upfront, such as a deed file, a deed restriction file, or anything else that is pertinent prior to the start of construction, that will be outlined and required for you to get a notice to proceed that states that you have executed your CUP, you have executed your deed restriction with the county, and we have it on file, or any other requirement. And now you may proceed with construction. So not only do you have to get your environmental done before you can contract, but even once you contract, you won't get access to funds until you get an established notice to proceed based upon what your program manager established what those guidelines are. One of those things is being signed off by Creo, stating that you have an approved CUP on file. Contractors must be certified. That's why I went to the website earlier that shows the updated list of certified individuals. Oh, yeah, man. I talked to such and such. He told me he was certified. I went ahead and signed him up. Sir, man, did you verify? Well, no, he told me. He even had a certificate. You mean a certificate that he made up? Go to the website.
On your list, you had MBEs and you had WBEs.
Yes.
City of Kansas City, don't you have M/WBEs? And how do you distinguish?
Good question. We have individuals that may be both an M and or a W. They have to designate on the project what they're going to be listed as. They can't be listed as both. Now, the only stipulation of where they can be listed as both on a project is if they're being utilized for both construction and both profession. So if I got a person that qualifies for service underneath construction, and they also qualifies for a deal underneath professional services, well, they can get MBE here and WB here. But they can't be an M and a WB underneath construction. They have to designate. Those are two different contracts per Creo.
This may be splitting hairs, but like if we want to exceed that, can we write that into the contract? I know that's not the city.
Yeah.
Set the minimum.
Well, you know what?
So you don't get
Right.
in trouble by going above, like,
Yeah, I know.
by saying,
And
ah,
we
it's
just-
gonna be 50%.
So,
A minute.
so,
So that's why I say, like, and maybe you just keep it that way, but like, we always feel we would like to hit that better in our, in some
Yeah.
of these projects, just because of.
here's what I would say to that.
Yeah.
Cause I had an individual a while back and they were adamant about, their goals or.
Yeah.
Here's it. I always set my goals higher than everybody else's goals.
Yeah.
Well, no, understand that you set your own goal. So these are,
Yeah,
these are goals, but your actual goals is based upon what you have been able to provide through a CP that's been approved, even through good faith efforts. So your goal is really through that process. So if the market says, guess what? We ain't got no painters because we got all this construction going on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can't set a goal and a requirement on something that is not feasible.
Yeah, fair.
So your goal, although it said 15 to 15, you may submit something that ends up being 10 and 5.
Yeah.
Right? That is your goal.
Yeah.
So if you said, hey, guess what? Man, I got 30% MBE, I got 30% WB.
Yeah.
Well, now your goal is 30 and 30. Now you're 60%.
Oh, I see.
You submitted that.
Yeah.
We said you just had to do
Yeah,
15
yeah.
and 15.
No, fair. Thank you. This makes sense.
So I didn't set your goal at 30 and 30. You did.
Internally.
Yeah. Internally, you are going to do it.
I don't like playing space with sandbags, but some people do. So
No, I mean,
you know,
thanks.
so
Yeah.
yeah. Now, here's the kicker, especially on the workforce, and I think it's even in the ordinance. If you double those goals, what you did, the city should recognize you for doing it. So if you had 15 to 15, you came in and you did 30 and 30. I need to email Brian or to say, hey, Brian, I need you to recognize me.
Right. But you don't do it in this contracting process. You do it internally. And
Yeah.
Fair. Fair. Yeah.
Doing the thing in the city.
Yeah,
We
right.
doubled it up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Contract execution and period of performance. Notice to proceed. Like I said, you got to get a notice to proceed. All contracts will be sent via DocuSign. That's the new process for review and execution. And I say this because I know a lot of times too, people are like, oh, well, I need to see the contract. I need to, have your lawyers mark it all up. I'm telling you right now, we got standardized language for standardized contracts. In most occasions, contracts are boilerplate language. Contracts are not altered more than 5% of what's standardized. There has to be some special situation, like we done a contract with the school board. The school board, by state law, they have to have certain language in that contract. That's an exception. Outside of that, we're not changing stuff just to, ease. We want to make sure that we are fair and concise across the board with all of our projects. And so you may ask to see the contract up front. You may submit something that your lawyer or somebody may have altered. It still has to be approved by the city. And if the city is not going to approve it, then again, it's our contract. So our stipulations, this is how we need to press forward. Housing Finance Department will issue a purchase order on the executed contract to secure the funding. The program manager will deliver the notice to proceed via DocuSign authorizing the work program to begin. Contracting activities are not allowed until the notice of proceed is endorsed. So again, you may have gotten a contract. If you proceeded before notice to proceed, then you're in violation. I will tell you this too, and I'm going back in my days when I was at Creo, doing a compliance check, showing up on a project, any given moment, it happens. So don't think, some people think they're gonna be slick, and I will say this, we are undermanned, right? So we got a handful of people overseeing hundreds of projects across the city. And so, no, everybody's not gonna be able to get every project all the time. But if somebody comes out there and they want to do a quality check or they want to do a compliance check, and you out of line, they will write that up and pass along that information. As it says right there, in addition to CREO, HCDD staff will conduct site visits to monitor contract projects for performance and compliance. All right. All right. Thanks, Becky. I appreciate you for joining us. Appreciate your feedback too. Reporting requirements. We have it. We have reporting requirements through our federal programs. We got reporting requirements through the city programs. You gotta, put your information in B2G. You gotta put your information in E-Comply. You gotta submit the reports to your program managers on a monthly basis, especially on drawdown stuff. Every month, and there's a reason for it, I'm gonna kind of dive into that real quick, but every month, either you submit a report on drawing down, or you submit a report on not drawing down, but you're gonna submit a report. It used to be that 9 months ago by, nobody ever submitted supposedly nobody ever submitted a drawdown. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I submitted draws 6 months ago. 3 months straight. Well, come to find out, they were submitting it to somebody that no longer worked there. So now, it's required in program managers and the developers, everybody's accounted for every month. That way we don't miss a beat. So if somebody leaves, if somebody picks up the project, obviously they need to do an introduction, but you're like, oh, I don't have anything to submit. Well, submit that you don't have nothing to submit. Document it, right? So now nobody can ever come back and say, oh, well, I submitted such and such, such and never got a response. There's rhyme and reason for why we do certain things a certain way. Must include support documentation of progress, benchmarks, CREO requirements, and photos. Okay. Here's the thing too, I want to let everybody know, and again, for about the 15th of each month. So HUD, believe it or not, they're asking for this information for us because they actually want to highlight all of our good dealings. So if they ask, hey, Dion, hey, Blaine, city manager, send us photos. Give us the most updated report. We got, big thing at headquarters. Somebody's coming down. They want to see something. Well, if we ain't consistent with getting and gathering this information, how are we supposed to share it with the dignitaries coming down to kind of tell the public of all the great things that we're doing? So it's not, as some people will say, oh man, it's time consuming, it's a burden. That's the cost for getting money. So I need you to do these things so we can, and guess what? We do that in a great way. Need a couple more $1 million. I know y'all been giving us 14, but come on here and give us 12. See all this good stuff we're doing? We got more work to do.
Continues.
All right. Anyway, again, make sure it's accurate in line. Cancel checks, funds will not be released until reimbursements are approved. All invoices for final payments are due within 30 days of the date of completion of the service set forth in the terms of the contract. Supportive documents, again, scope of work, subcontracts, invoices, receipts, banks, credit cards, card statements, pictures of the work performed, any relatable documentation. Closing process. Again, you may be done with your project, but you ain't closed out. Because I got to do checks and balances to make sure all your compliance is done correctly, which means checking with CREO, which means checking with our program managers to make sure all your reporting, we got to put the stuff in IDS. We got to just do all these different things, right? Well, you say, oh, I'm done. No, you're not done. You got to get this approved because there could be some liquidated damages associated. Did you ever really meet your goals? Did everybody really get paid prevailing wage? Did you you know, did the money go to the things that were required, you know, per HUD? Like, do you have a report that shows those things? So typically, we're holding 10%, or how I tell my staff to do is align the 10% with a scope that is final. So that way, we know we're not giving you all the money up front. And not have anything to kind of hold you at the end for some accountability. Last but not least, technical assistance and contact information. Your point of contact is going to be Nicole Woods for this. So that is her email address. Again, you can call her, leave a message, but make sure you email her. And then if you have any other questions that may not pertain to CDBG with another program, those are the point of contacts. Or if you have some generalized questions that you may want to ask about, you can also email our housing department email. Any questions? I don't know, I probably took way longer than I
Mine's a
wanted
very
to.
basic. When I'm on the website, where is the link to, where is the link to this specific ask?
Yeah. So when you go to the federal, when you go to our federal, what is it? So right here, you see where we're on the
Yep.
main page. You
Yep.
click on that.
Yep.
When you click on that, it's gonna bring you to this page, and you're gonna see requests for proposals and application forms. You see that? It's gonna be like a several different boxes. It's gonna be, but that specific box says request for proposals and application form. Do you see that? Okay. Then you will see all of those. Yeah. So you got, this is your regular.
Yeah.
And then this one says, oh, so that's, yeah. Yeah, so the reprogramming.
Yeah, there.
So yeah, click on the reprogramming one. There you go, yep.
Okay. No, thanks, Deanna.
Again, this information, I'm gonna try to edit it, maybe a little all over the place, because we was all over the place when we started, but hopefully this has been highly informative. Oh, I do want to show you something else too, because it was a crazy, they was like, oh man, well, how do we know what does it say? What constitutes as an urgent need, Deanna? I mean, you got the three things right here as far as benefit to low, moderate income prevention. What's an urgent need? Looky here. I done got you CDBG 101, and it explains everything that you need to know in detail. Okay, so my whole deal, and the volume is not working right now, but it steps it down for you. So I like to, going back, putting on my teacher hat, I like to provide resources for people to, like I said, not only learn, but have access to it 24/7, share the information. Knowledge is power. Go ahead and strengthen your knowledge up so you can submit a strong application. And I will say this too, it is a very competitive process. Just because you don't get it, if you don't get it, doesn't mean you didn't have a strong application. It just means, and you know, we do like to provide some of that technical assistance. So if you say, oh man, you know, well, what happened? We know we can kind of give you some feedback, and I highly encourage you to keep applying. Okay? So, one no is another opportunity for another yes. Okay?
Appreciate you, Deanna.
Thank you all. Oh, last thing I do want to say. If for whatever reason you change your project, you automatically disqualify yourself. So I've had some people in the past, oh man, it took too long for me to get the money. I went ahead and did it myself. I want to utilize this money for something else. That got to go back to a council approval. We are awarding you these funds based for, and it doesn't matter what the reasoning for it is. It just matters. We have an ordinance that says this specific money goes to this specific project for this specific scope. If anything of that stuff changes, then we have to go back to ordinance for that approval. So just kind of understand that part of that waiting game, it may not be moving as fast as you like, but that is a risk that you take. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dion.